Hey guys, Omerko here, self-taught web developer. In today's video we have another developer discussion, and this time we will talk about JavaScript and also TypeScript. Plan is to see both technologies. Are those similar? What are the difference between those? Advantages and disadvantages for both. Before we jump into this video, just a friendly reminder. I post new web development content on a weekly basis, so if you would like to see more of those, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Now, into the video. First of all, let's see what is JavaScript. So, JavaScript is a programming language that is used from, 1995, but initially was known as a Mocha. Through years, JavaScript improved and also changed its name from Mocha through ECMAScript to now language known as a JavaScript. In today's era, JavaScript shaped and formed, modern web development. As today we do have multiple helpful technologies that are working closely with JavaScript, like on our frontend we could have like Angular, React and Vue frameworks. But in meantime, JavaScript also advanced further, and now it is also supporting our backend side, and with those we can use technologies like Node.js, Express.js and so on. TypeScript, on the other hand, is a programming language which was created as a superset from a JavaScript. That means that every feature that JavaScript supports, TypeScript supports also, as the whole language was created from modern JavaScript. The language itself was developed by Microsoft, and to this day it is still being maintained by Microsoft. TypeScript is also designed in such a way that it can develop a large-scale application and, compile those at the end to a JavaScript. So if we already had JavaScript, why the TypeScript was developed in the first place? Well, you see, back in the days developers used to use only JavaScript and only to use it on a client side. But as JavaScript as a whole language progressed, we were soon introduced to technology called Node.js, and with it we were able to run our environment for our JavaScript code, which will read and execute our code on a server side. And in that, JavaScript code became complex. Even though its main features and syntax look easy enough, it was still harder to read, debug and also maintain JavaScript code because all of those upgrades that were happening to JavaScript as a language. And then at that point Microsoft had an idea for a project called TypeScript. TypeScript as a language was introduced to us as a more strict language. Starting from its name, it was primarily used to add proper types to our JavaScript code. So for example, if we would have an age of a user set to a number of 23, then we won't be able to override that value from a number to a boolean or a string, for example, because in TypeScript that property should hold a number value. But in a plain JavaScript there were no boundaries at all, specifically in that domain. So at any given point, developer could make a mistake and use a different value for a specific dataset. So just by creating TypeScript, Microsoft was able to integrate more strict way of coding and shrink the gap that was created with modern JavaScript. Now let's talk a bit about differences between these two languages. Today, in this era, we can openly say that the TypeScript itself is not that different from a JavaScript. It is also often referred that the TypeScript as a language is just the JavaScript with types. But once the TypeScript came on a scene, there were quite a lot of changes and differences. So for example, next to those strict types and types changes, TypeScript is also object-oriented programming language, while JavaScript itself is a scripting language. TypeScript also supports something we called modules, and by those we are able to organize our project better, maintain our code much easier, while JavaScript doesn't support that at all, and on top of that we have to do all of those things manually. One also cool thing that came with TypeScript is something called interfaces. Declaring an interface itself would give us option to create kinda our own custom types. So for example, we could have some data with the custom type itself, and that data should always refer to that interface, our custom type that we created. So we won't be able to override its values into different types, because those should not be in our interface at all. Me personally, I do prefer TypeScript, and here is why. To be honest, I code without issues with TypeScript and JavaScript as well, but I do prefer TypeScript over JavaScript. Maybe for some of the portfolio projects I would rather use JavaScript, but for larger application I would choose TypeScript without a question. Next to the TypeScript, I do work with the technologies like Angular and Nest.js. Both of those are utilized TypeScript quite extensively, and that is one of the main reasons why do I prefer TypeScript in the first place. But here are more advantages of TypeScript over JavaScript. We obviously use strict types with TypeScript, so we are excluding any shape or form with mistypes. And for me that is a big deal. TypeScript also compiles our code, and while doing that it can also show us some errors that we've written, so basically we could fix those errors even before our deployment. There are definitely more advantages to TypeScript, but as I said earlier, TypeScript itself is just a JavaScript with types today. But is there any crucial disadvantages of using TypeScript itself? Well, yeah, TypeScript do have a bad side. This is obviously not a big one, but it can obviously affect our large-scale applications. That one disadvantage is basically that TypeScript itself takes a lot of time to compile our code. So in smaller web applications it can look just as a few seconds, but where we are making a larger scale applications with different plugins and different checks through our pipelines and so on, that compiling could take some time. And just to tell you something, I said that I prefer TypeScript over JavaScript. But you should definitely not feel bad if you are a JavaScript developer. JavaScript is a kind of a scripting language that today is definitely a king of browser web applications, which is, well, very frequently used today. If you would also like to learn JavaScript, you should know that I have many tutorials and projects here on my YouTube channel. Next to that, I do have my Let's Code series on SKILLSHARE, where you can create real-life projects with a variety of different technologies. So for example, in that series you could create a password generator with JavaScript, tic-tac-toe game with JavaScript, or even full-stack weather application with Node.js and Express.js. If you would like to take a look into those SKILLSHARE courses, down in the description of this video you will have a link which will grant you access for 1 whole month, which is absolutely free. And one small reminder before I close this video. I post web development videos on a weekly basis on my channel, so please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you can be notified when I post a new video. This will be all for this one. Thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw, please make sure to like and subscribe as I am posting new content weekly. Thank you once again, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.